A heartbroken millionaire CEO sat alone on a cold hospital bench, suit drenched in rain, clutching a wedding ring he couldn't let go of. His world, power, success, fame had all crumbled in one night. People passed him by, whispering, too afraid to approach the man they once envied. But a little boy, barefoot and shivering, stopped. Without a word, he handed the millionaire his only toy truck and said something that made the powerful man's eyes fill with tears. That night, two broken souls crossed paths, and 20 years later, their worlds would collide again in a way no one could believe. Ethan Cole was once the kind of man everyone admired, a millionaire CEO with the charm of a movie star and the vision of a billionaire dreamer. His face filled magazine covers, his name whispered in boardrooms. But after the accident that took his wife, nothing mattered. His mansion overlooking Malibu's quiet cliffs became a prison of silence. No laughter, no light, just the endless echo of ocean waves crashing against glass walls. Every morning, Ethan went through the same routine. Press suit, coffee untouched, news on mute. His company, Cole Technologies, was breaking records, but Ethan barely noticed. His assistant would often find him standing by the window, lost. He had everything the world envied and nothing his heart needed. Across the city, in a fading East Los Angeles neighborhood, lived Grace Reed and her 8-year-old son, Noah. Their apartment was small, but full of warmth, the smell of pancakes, the hum of an old fan, and Grace's soft singing as she got ready for her morning shift at the diner. Her health was fragile, but she never let Noah see her weakness. He was her only strength, her only reason to keep going. Noah didn't have fancy toys or new shoes, but he had something rare, a big heart. He'd often sit outside their building, watching cars rush by, dreaming of becoming someone important one day, someone who could help his mum rest. That cold night at the hospital had changed him. He had seen a powerful man cry like a child, and it taught him something about life, that pain didn't care about money, titles or fame. The next morning, while Grace rushed to work, Noah found himself thinking about the millionaire again. He wondered who the man was and why he looked so lost. But soon his mother's cough pulled him back to reality. Grace smiled through the pain and said softly, "We just keep going, baby." That's what strong people do. Miles away, in his marble office high above downtown Los Angeles, Ethan Cole stared at the tiny toy truck now sitting on his desk. It didn't belong there, yet he couldn't throw it away. Every time he looked at it, he heard the boy's innocent voice echo, "This makes people brave." His board members thought Ethan was distracted. His investors whispered that the CEO had lost his edge. Only one man smiled. Vince Marlowe, Ethan's ambitious right hand, who had waited years for Ethan to fall apart. That evening, Ethan decided to visit the hospital again, hoping to see the boy who had given him that strange spark of peace. But the nurse said no one matched that description. Just a few families had passed through that night. Ethan stood in the empty corridor, holding the toy tighter. Somewhere out there was a child who had given him hope when he had none. And as the lights flickered above him, he whispered to himself, "I'll find him someday." Outside, a cold wind swept through the streets of Los Angeles. Across town, Grace collapsed behind the diner counter, her hand slipping off a coffee cup as the sound of sirens filled the night. And once again, Ethan Cole was closer to that boy than he could ever imagine. 10 years had passed since that rainy night outside the hospital, but for Ethan Cole, time had done little to heal. His company had doubled in value, his face appeared again in Forbes, yet every victory felt hollow. The world saw a billionaire CEO, but behind those sharp suits was a man still haunted by the memory of a small, trembling boy who had once handed him a toy truck and whispered something that pierced his heart. Across the city, Noah Reed was now a quiet teenager helping his mother at the same little Santa Monica diner she'd worked at for years. The neon sign buzzed faintly, the smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the air, and Grace's cough had grown worse. She always brushed it off with a weak smile, but Noah knew better. He worked after school washing dishes, saving every dollar he could, One late afternoon, a group of executives in tailored suits stepped into the diner. Strangers in a humble place like this. Among them was Ethan, disguised in casual clothes, a baseball cap pulled low. He'd been driving aimlessly after another board meeting, filled with empty talk about profits and acquisitions. When he spotted the small diner, something about it felt familiar. He didn't know why, but he went in. Noah noticed him right away, not as a customer, but as the sad man from the hospital years ago. His heart skipped. The man looked older, heavier with silence, but those eyes, they were the same. Without thinking, Noah approached with a nervous smile and said softly, "You're the man who cried that night." Every conversation in the diner stopped. Plates paused midair. Forks froze. The CEO panicked. He stared at the boy, unable to speak. The other executives turned, confused. Ethan stood, forcing a polite smile, whispering, "You must be mistaken, kid." But Noah didn't back down. He pointed toward Ethan's hand, the one that still carried the faint mark of a ring. "You dropped that ring the night you lost someone." The diner fell completely silent. Ethan's heart slammed in his chest. He wanted to deny it, but his throat tightened. The boy's words pulled him right back to that rain-soaked bench, to the night that never stopped haunting him. Slowly he sat down again. "Sit with me," he said quietly, over a plate of pancakes. Noah talked about his mom, her illness, her strength, and the dream of building a small place where people could eat for free if they couldn't afford it. His voice was gentle, innocent, and it disarmed the man who once commanded entire markets. For the first time in years, Ethan listened, really listened. When they finished, Grace came over, wiping her hands on her apron. She froze when she saw Ethan. She recognized him instantly from TV. "Mr. Cole, you shouldn't be here. This isn't your world," she said softly, her tone respectful yet wary, but Noah smiled proudly. "Mom, this is the man I told you about, the one I met when I was little." Grace's eyes softened. She nodded slightly, but her voice trembled. "Then you should thank him for the kindness he showed you." Ethan looked down, guilt flooding him. "No," he said quietly. "It was your son who showed kindness to me." Outside, Vince Marlowe sat in his car across the street, watching through the diner's window. His phone buzzed, a message from the board. "Cole's slipping again." "Handle it." Inside, Noah offered Ethan a refill of coffee. "You look tired," he said. "You should rest more." "You work too hard." Ethan gave a broken smile. "I forgot what rest even feels like." As he reached into his pocket, he touched the small toy truck, now slightly faded from time. He placed it on the table between them. "I kept it," he whispered. Noah's eyes widened. Grace covered her mouth in shock. Before anyone could speak, the diner lights flickered, followed by the sound of sirens outside, loud, urgent, growing closer. A woman screamed from the street. Vince's car door opened sharply. Ethan turned toward the window just as a shadow passed by, a figure watching them from across the road. And in that tense silence, Ethan realized something that made his pulse stop. The boy who once saved his soul was now in danger because of him. The sirens faded, but the tension lingered like static in the air. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. When he turned back, Noah and Grace were trying to calm a frightened customer who had seen a dark sedan speed past the diner. Grace smiled, pretending everything was fine, but her trembling hands said otherwise. The next morning, the diner reopened as if nothing had happened. But across town, in Cole Technologies' marble conference room, Vince Marlowe was already planting seeds of doubt. He showed the board photos of Ethan at the diner. "Your Millionaire CEO spends time in rundown cafes," he said coldly. "While investors wait for progress, he's out feeding sob stories." The room murmured. It was all Vince needed. By afternoon, Ethan's assistant handed him a file marked confidential. Inside were reports. His own company preparing to shut down a local distribution center in Long Beach to cut costs. Hundreds of workers would lose their jobs, including several who lived near the diner. Ethan's signature was already stamped on the approval form. Vince had done it behind his back. Ethan's chest tightened. "He used my name," he whispered, He drove to Long Beach that evening, rain streaking across his windshield. Inside the warehouse, men and women packed boxes in silence. Noah was there helping an older worker stack crates. When Ethan stepped through the doorway, muddy water splashing under his shoes, everyone froze. They recognized him immediately. The CEO, the man from the news. Noah blinked, surprised. "You came." Ethan's voice was soft, almost ashamed. "I didn't know they were closing this place. Not until today." A worker shouted, "It's your company!" And the room erupted in anger. Noah stood between them. "He's not like that," he said firmly. "He didn't know." His voice carried through the echoing warehouse, steady and brave. Later they sat on the loading dock, watching the rain pour. Noah told him how his mother's cough had worsened, how they barely kept up with medical bills. Ethan listened, feeling the weight of every dollar he'd ever made. "She still smiles," Noah said quietly, "even when she's in pain. She says kindness is the only thing that keeps her alive." Ethan's throat tightened. He reached into his coat, pulling out the worn toy truck again. "She was right," he whispered. "Kindness built everything that ever mattered to me." But their quiet moment shattered when Ethan's phone buzzed. A news alert flashed across the screen. Cole Technologies faces accusations of corruption and fraud. Vince's name wasn't mentioned, but the story hinted at questionable decisions made by CEO Ethan Cole. He felt his world spin. Vince had gone public. And worse, he'd done it using the diner incident as proof that Ethan had lost control. Ethan stood, fists trembling. "He's turning everything good into poison." Noah's eyes hardened. "Then fight back. Prove him wrong." As thunder rumbled above them, Ethan made a promise. "I will. Not just for me, for your mother, for this place, for everyone he's hurt." They didn't notice the black sedan pull up near the edge of the dock, headlights off. Vince's driver stepped out, watching silently before dialing a number. A voice answered coldly, "He's with the boy again?" "Yes," the driver replied. "Then make sure he regrets it." Lightning cracked through the sky. Ethan turned his head slightly, sensing danger in the wind, somewhere behind the warehouse walls. A plan had already begun, one that would break everything before it could be fixed. The storm that night was relentless. Wind tore through the streets, rain hammered the glass walls of Cole Technologies, and the city below drowned in chaos. Inside the executive tower, Ethan Cole walked into his office to find the board waiting, their faces cold, their decision already made. "Ethan," Vince began smoothly, "the shareholders have lost faith. You've become unstable. You're letting emotions guide business." He tossed a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of Ethan with Noah and Grace, taken secretly through the diner's window. "This isn't leadership. It's weakness." Ethan's heart pounded. "You used them to make me look like a fool." Vince smiled faintly. "You did that yourself." The words hit harder than any storm. Ethan's hands shook, not from fear but fury. "You forged those documents. You closed the Long Beach site. You framed me." Before Vince could reply, the office doors burst open. Noah stood there, drenched from the rain, chest heaving. He had seen the breaking news. Ethan Cole faces termination amid scandal. He couldn't stay silent. "Stop lying!" Noah's voice echoed through the boardroom. "He's the only one who cares about those workers. You're the one stealing from them." Everyone froze. The guards moved forward, but Ethan raised his hand. "Let him speak." Noah took a step closer, trembling but determined. "I saw the files. I know what you did, Vince. You hid money through shell companies. You used his name to cover it up." Vince's expression hardened. "You think anyone will believe a poor kid from nowhere?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "They will," he said softly, "because I do." The tension exploded. Vince lunged forward, snatching Ethan's phone to delete the evidence Ethan had just uncovered. Papers scattered, chairs slammed to the ground. The guards tried to separate them, but Ethan grabbed Vince by the collar. "You destroyed lives for money. You have no idea what it means to lose everything." Noah shouted, "Stop!" But it was too late. Vince shoved Ethan backward, sending him crashing into a glass wall. The room fell into stunned silence as the toy truck tumbled from Ethan's pocket and clattered onto the floor. Everyone's eyes locked on it. For a moment, the mighty Millionaire CEO lay on the ground beside the same symbol of kindness that once saved him. Then through the ringing in his ears, Ethan heard Noah's voice trembling. "Mr. Cole, look behind you." Ethan turned just as Vince's hand reached into his jacket pocket and the faint glint of metal caught the light. The board gasped. The storm raged louder, and in that instant, everything hung on a single heartbeat. The tension snapped in an instant. Vince lunged forward, but Noah moved faster, grabbing his arm before the weapon could rise. The sound of struggle filled the boardroom. Shouts, overturned chairs, the crash of breaking glass. Ethan stumbled to his feet, adrenaline cutting through the pain. "Noah, get back!" he shouted, but the boy refused. Security rushed in, but Vince fought like a cornered wolf. "You'll lose everything, Cole," he snarled. "This company, your name, your legacy, it's all mine." Ethan's voice broke through the chaos. "You're wrong, Vince. Kindness built this company. You only fed off it." For a brief second, their eyes locked, the ruthless businessman against the man who'd rediscovered his humanity. Vince swung wildly, but Ethan caught his arm, twisting it until the weapon clattered to the floor. The guards pinned Vince down as he cursed and struggled. The board members stood frozen, realizing the truth they had ignored for too long. Breathing heavily, Ethan looked at Noah, who stood trembling but unbroken. "You shouldn't have risked yourself," Ethan said, voice soft but full of pride. Noah's reply was quiet, tearful and pure. "You once said you lost everything. I didn't want you to lose yourself too." The room fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. When the police arrived minutes later, Vince was taken away, still shouting threats that no one listened to. The board offered apologies and nervous words about damage control, but Ethan wasn't listening. He picked up the toy truck from the floor, its paint chipped, one wheel missing, and pressed it into Noah's hand. "This," he said, his voice breaking, "reminds me that a single act of kindness can rebuild an entire life." Noah nodded, eyes glistening. "Then keep building, Mr. Cole." Ethan smiled faintly, a rare, fragile smile. "No," he said. "We'll build together." Outside, the storm began to fade. The first hint of dawn crept through the clouds, painting the skyline gold. But inside the tower, one final message arrived on Ethan's phone, an email from an anonymous sender. Subject line: "You stopped Vince, but not the ones behind him." Ethan's blood ran cold. He looked out over the city, knowing this battle was only the beginning, and somewhere in that rising light, new shadows were already waiting. Months passed since that stormy night that nearly destroyed everything Ethan Cole had built. The scandal had been exposed, the lies torn apart, and Vince Marlowe sentenced for fraud and attempted assault. The board restructured the company, but this time Ethan refused to return to the cold, glossy image of the untouchable Millionaire CEO. He changed everything. The company that once thrived on competition and fear was rebuilt around kindness and fairness. Ethan introduced healthcare programs for every employee, reopened the Long Beach warehouse, and named it Grace Logistics, in honor of Grace Reed, the woman who taught him dignity even in struggle. Workers cried when they saw the new sign, painted bright blue with a simple motto beneath, "People before profit." Grace, after months of treatment funded by Ethan, had finally regained her strength. She returned to her diner, not because she had to, but because it was home. She often said, "Kindness doesn't retire." And every Sunday, Ethan visited, sitting quietly at his usual booth while she poured him coffee with a proud smile. Noah, now a young man, worked closely beside Ethan. What began as mentorship turned into partnership. He had grown into a brilliant visionary, humble, patient, and deeply human. He understood what Ethan once didn't, that real leadership was about compassion, not control. Together, they built an initiative supporting children from poor neighborhoods, giving them education and opportunity, a life Ethan wished he could have given himself long ago. On the anniversary of the night they first met, Ethan invited Noah and Grace to the company's main headquarters. The entire workforce gathered, from executives to janitors, everyone standing together in quiet respect. Ethan stepped forward, holding a small velvet box. He handed it to Noah. Inside was the toy truck, polished and placed on a golden stand with an engraving that read, "To the boy who taught a millionaire how to be human." Noah's eyes filled with tears. "You kept it all these years?" Ethan nodded, voice trembling. "That night you gave me courage when I had none. You gave without expecting anything back. That's what real wealth is, and now it's yours." Noah tried to speak, but his voice broke. Ethan continued, "I'm retiring today. This company, everything I have, it belongs to someone who knows what it means to lose everything and still give." The crowd gasped softly. Ethan turned to the board. "Effective immediately, Noah Reed will be the new CEO of Cole Technologies." Grace covered her mouth, crying silently. The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing like thunder. Not the storm of destruction this time, but the storm of rebirth. Noah stood frozen, heart pounding. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. Ethan smiled, eyes wet. "Say thank you. To that little boy who gave his only toy to a stranger who didn't deserve it." The applause softened into a wave of emotion. Noah walked to the podium, holding the toy truck high. "This," he said, voice steady, "is proof that kindness is never wasted. It circles back, sometimes in ways we can't imagine." Grace wiped her tears as sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, washing the room in gold. Ethan stood quietly in the back, a peaceful smile crossing his face. For the first time in decades, he felt whole. Later that evening, as the city lights shimmered over Los Angeles, Ethan looked out from his balcony one last time. The world that once seemed empty now pulsed with life. And somewhere far below, in the company lobby, that small toy truck sat proudly in a glass case, a symbol of kindness, hope, and a promise fulfilled. The poor boy who once comforted a heartbroken millionaire now carried his legacy, not built on money, but on the power of a single selfless act.